Tonight, a tragic look at a year in review as the opioid crisis leads to another record year of overdose deaths in Saskatchewan. Also, Canadians in Western Mexico are told to shelter in place by our federal government after a deadly wave of violence. Plus, just as the changing weather gives us some breathtaking winter scenes, we take a look at the changes in TV weather forecasting.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Friday, January 6th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Opioids are continuing to cut a deadly swath across our province. It appears Saskatchewan set a new record for overdose deaths in 2022. The latest stats from the provincial coroners service paint a grim picture. Dan Zakreski brings us the story.
The province's chief coroner is trying to find a silver lining in a very dark cloud.
The positive thing out of the statistics is that the amount of increase is decreasing quite substantially.
What Clive Wayhill is talking about is the year-to-year increase in drug overdose deaths. He says that total is now climbing by tens of deaths a year, not hundreds. The problem is that Saskatchewan has set a record for drug toxicity deaths each year for the past 5 years. Back in 2016, it reported that 109 people died from an overdose. Now that slowly increased to 179 deaths in 2019. Then the number nearly doubled to 323 people in 2020. Another dramatic leap the next year. And now, if the numbers hold, 421 people died of overdoses in 2022. That includes confirmed and suspected deaths. The coroner's report also shows where people died. Regina recorded the highest number of deaths, 85 confirmed so far, followed by Saskatoon with 45 confirmed. The two largest cities are followed by Lloydminster with 9 people, Moose Jaw with 5, and then Prince Albert and Swift Current with 4 each. Wayhill says the deaths are also stressing the coroner's service.
That's driven the amount of autopsies we're doing per year by about 400 autopsies additional a year, which means we've had to hire 2 extra forensic pathologists. And then, of course, there's a cost of transporting the decedent in for the autopsy and then transporting them back from where the place of death was.
Wayhill says there's no simple fix for drug overdose deaths because there's no one solution for addictions. Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
The final numbers are in for how many people in Saskatchewan died from COVID-19 in 2022. A government report released today shows 832 people died from COVID-related illnesses last year. That is up from the year before when 802 people died from COVID. Meanwhile, the government says it has detected the new XB1.5 subvariant in Saskatchewan. It's being called the most transmissible COVID strain so far.
Like previous new sublineages, they gain in their share of the infections because they're able to outcompete other viruses. So this particular one seems to be able to evade immunity from past infection or even from some immunization in terms of people getting symptomatic. And it seems to be able to adhere to body cells a bit better in the respiratory tract. So it's a bit more infective that way. So that's why you would expect it to gain ground over time.
The province has also announced it's expanding vaccination options for children and teens. You're encouraged to visit a walk-in clinic or book an appointment online. Packed hospitals for a variety of reasons are why an Alberta woman who contracted flesh-eating disease in Mexico could not get medevaced home. She's finally on her way back to Canada, but Erin Collins has more now on how a hospital bed shortage here left the woman stuck in a foreign country.
It was supposed to be a fun family getaway, Christmas at this Mexican resort. But after just one dip in the pool, things went south for this Alberta family.
At 3 a.m. I woke up and my leg was just super swollen and red and hot to touch.
Later that day, Maya Stock was in hospital, diagnosed with flesh-eating disease. Stock spent Christmas at this private hospital. Doctors there performed emergency surgery on Boxing Day.
They were worried that if it got to my bone, then I'd lose my leg. And so that was scary to hear that.
After that first surgery, 2 more procedures were needed. It was recommended that Maya be medevaced home for those. But taking off was easier said than done. Edmonton hospitals didn't have a bed for her, so she had to stay put in Mexico.
We learned that it's not that simple, and that there's a real difficulty across Canada in getting beds, and especially in Alberta.
Alberta Health Services confirms beds are hard to come by, saying hospitals continue to experience significant capacity challenges due to an ongoing surge in respiratory illnesses. But travel insurers say crowded hospitals aren't just an Alberta problem.
We have experienced some delays in repatriation in other provinces, so it's not unique to Alberta.
The doctor who tried to get Maya Stock home has some advice for Canadian travelers. If you have health concerns, think twice.
Any travel that's not necessary, at this time might not be a good idea.
As for Maya Stock, she finally flies home today. Now, once she lands, she'll need to get checked out at an Alberta hospital, and she says she's already bracing for a long wait. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Ottawa is warning Canadians in western Mexico to shelter in place. A deadly wave of violence is gripping the city of Culiacan and surrounding areas. It started after authorities arrested the son of the notorious drug boss known as El Chapo. Garrett Bailey has this report.
29 people have been killed in this violence. Violence has gripped this region in western Mexico since yesterday morning. Officials in Mexico this morning said 19 of those that were killed were gang members. 10 of those were from the country's military. No civilian deaths were reported, but there were injuries above that death toll. And officials also said that 21 people were arrested over the past 2 days. All of this violence is in response to the arrest of Ovidio Guzman. He is the son of El Chapo, but in his own right, also a senior player in the Sinaloa cartel. Allegedly, he is intricately involved with the production of fentanyl in that area. Right now, he's being held at a maximum security prison. Since his arrest, though, cartel members have responded with a show of violence that's ground life in this region to a halt. The city of Culiacan is telling its citizens to stay inside. The airport in that city is still shut down today. And yesterday, travelers trying to leave the region were forced to hide underneath plane windows and in between seats as cartel members shot at the plane from outside. You can see this video here where people hiding basically underneath anything that they can find. Apparently, these gunshots were an attempt to stop Guzman's arrest and his jailing. Last night, Global Affairs Canada responded to all this, issuing warnings to Canadians in the region, telling them to shelter in place if possible. Also, avoid areas where crowds are gathering and don't attempt to cross road blockades, even ones that appear abandoned. Tina Dahl of Edmonton spoke to reporters about her family's situation. 6 of her relatives are in the Mexican city of Mazatlan. They were supposed to leave last night, but Dahl says they can't because those buses that were supposed to bring them to the airport were burned. She told the Canadian press there was a shootout at the airport, so airports are shut down and the cartel put their warriors outside the hotel. I just know my brother and his family are stuck in hotel right now. The federal government says more than 12,000 Canadians have registered themselves as being in Mexico, but given that type of registration is completely voluntary, many don't do it. That number is likely much higher.
And that is the CBC's Garrett Barry reporting, Hockey fans are basking in the glow of another World Junior title after Team Canada's overtime win in last night's final. Matt Cohen has a look at how it all unfolded.
Joshua walks in, well, it's a gold medal game that will not soon be forgotten. The Canadians and the Czechs certainly lived up to the hype. The Canadians hoping for a bit of revenge after the Czechs beat them on the opening day of the tournament in Boxing Day. And it certainly got off to a great start for the Canadians. In the first period, Dylan Guenther rips home a shot on the power play. That gets the fans on their feet. He was loaned to Team Canada by his NHL club, the Arizona Coyotes. that certainly paid off. Canada led for most of this hockey game 2-0 in the third period, but the Czechs would not make it that easy. In fact, it became very tense. The Czechs fight back. Yuri Kulich brings the Czech Republic back to within a goal. And then less than a minute later, the Czech Republic gets a fortunate bounce. Jakub Kus getting credit. That means we go to overtime, 3-on-3, and that's where the magic happened. Brant Clark starts this play. Joshua Waugh sets up Gunther for his second goal of the game. It's a golden goal. Halifax erupts in joy. So does the rest of the country. Canada wins its second gold medal in a row at the World Junior Hockey Championship.
It was amazing!
It's just incredible experience with my boy. Yay!
Well, all the talk in the tournament has been about the 17-year-old phenom Connor Bedard from North Vancouver, BC. He was named the youngest ever tournament MVP. He shattered records and rewrote his name in the tournament history book, becoming the top scoring Canadian in terms of goals and points, and some terrific moments, a great pass in this championship game for the gold medal, and also a terrific overtime winner that stands as one of the greatest goals in World Juniors history. That was against Slovakia in overtime in the quarterfinal. So today the Canadians leave Halifax. They'll go back to the respective clubs in junior hockey and in the NHL, but they will be bringing a valuable gold medal with them and also a memory that will last a lifetime. Matt Cullen, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, depending on which window you looked out today, it might have looked like it was snowing. In many cases, it was just remnants of yesterday's snow and rime ice coming off the trees. Thankfully, the sun did make an appearance later in the day. And are we done with the fog that's creating these picturesque moments? Ethan will let you know in his forecast after the break. Before we get to Ethan, weather forecasting on television has had different looks throughout the years. From the early days of chalk and blackboard to modern computer graphics. Meteorologist Christy Kleimenhage looks back on the journey that the world of TV has seen and where it may go next.
Some of you may remember when your weather forecast looked a little something like this. Now, when I became a TV forecaster 10 years ago, it looked a little more like this. But how did we get from this to this? Let's take a trip back in time. People have been trying to understand and predict the weather for millennia, but it wasn't until the 19th century that we really began to see anything that looks like modern forecasting, developing weather charts and transmitting weather reports by telegraph. As for getting that information out to the public, Canada got its first TV weatherman in 1952 when Percy Saltzman hit the airwaves with his chalk and blackboard.
And that area of action is even greater than this and more violent. You have a very tightly wound up storm that covers all of Western Canada.
With no computers or internet, the graphics you saw were a product of the meteorologist's artistry on chalkboard or plexiglass with a grease marker. The 1960s and 70s brought magnets and the occasional radar image, but then technology really started to change in a hurry in the 1980s. And former CBC meteorologist Claire Martin started just in time to see it firsthand.
We used to get forecast model data on what was called MoFax. It was huge sheets of paper that were wet because they'd been printed like an old newspaper printing press, highly flammable, probably not very good for your health. And we would draw maps on that. The gentleman that worked before me had still a marker, a pen, and a big, huge map. I was slightly more sort of advanced, technologically speaking, and we had automatic weather stations put around Edmonton, which was just massive. I could tell that the temperature in Sherwood Park was different from St. Albert, which was huge.
In the 90s, computerized graphics made their way to the forefront.
It's akin to having a black and white TV with like 4 channels, which I grew up with, my friend, to satellite TV, all the colors, pick and choose, streaming when you want it.
With computer models and graphics, we could see weather as it happened, visualize low pressure systems, see the downdrafts for thunderstorms, and where hail was forming. And of course, more information also makes for a more accurate forecast, especially when it comes to the next 24 hours. I've already used TV graphics that are a little more modern like these for 10 years, but where will weather reporting go next? We've already got holograms, virtual reality, and interactive 3D green screens, so the sky really is the limit. And that makes some of the veterans a little jealous.
I'd like to be around for that. If I get a second chance at a second life, I'd love to do that.
And hey, it sure beats delivering weather by Morse code. Christy Kleiman-Haga, CBC News, Edmonton.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. 22 model clear out is on now.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now. Some great archive footage there. Fun fact, in high school, I had to do a weather forecast in a journalism class. It was drawn on paper.
Oh, wow.
And I am excited that there is no footage of that exists.
Well, you know, you're welcome to come on over and try it anytime you want.
You have all the power in that clicker. I want nothing to do with it.
Okay, well, at least it's not chalk or magnets I have to work with. But and a couple of CBC former weather specialists on there for some eagle-eyed CBC viewers. You may have seen Howard Thornton, who did the weather here a couple of decades ago, and Johnny Sandison, Regina weather legend as well. So hello to them if they are watching. Now, one thing that has stood the test of time of weather is frost and rime ice, and we have seen a lot of that over the last little while here. And for those of you who are wondering, there's a little bit of a difference between the two. Rime ice, this is what happens when we get fog at temperatures below the freezing mark. And those little water droplets in the fog tend to freeze onto the surface of things like trees and bridges and even light posts out there. And it's a little heavier and harder to remove than the hoarfrost, which forms during very clear, cold nights. And basically what happens is the ice goes through something called sublimation, which is where it goes right from the ice stage to the gas stage while skipping the liquid stage altogether. And that makes it really light to dust off. And the reason that we've been seeing that is because there's really nothing happening in our atmosphere, and this is why the jet stream is basically in one big straight long line around the world, and usually it has these big ridges or troughs, but right now, especially in between Asia and the western coast of the United States, it's just all in one big straight line. You could trace it with a ruler basically. Unfortunately, not good news for California. They've just been pummeled with an atmospheric river of storms over these past little while, and on Monday it looks like they're going to get another big one as well. But for us, we're far from that. And we're just seeing the fog, and a little bit of upper ridging means that we're going to get some warm air moving in over the next couple of days through the province. Quite warm in some places. Now, this isn't the actual temperatures, as I always like to point out, but it will warm up between this afternoon and tomorrow, some 10 to 15 degrees in some places in Saskatchewan. The western side of the province, not much of a temperature change because you're already quite warm right now. Southwestern part of the province, still at freezing in Maple Creek. That warm air going to spill its way eastward, where we're still into the mid to upper minus teens in portions of eastern Saskatchewan. High pressure moving out is going to allow that southerly flow, that nice warm air to move in. A mostly sunny day through the province tomorrow, except for the north, where we'll see mostly cloudy conditions. Mix of sun and cloud on Sunday, but even as we get to Monday, no real major systems moving in, but a little bit of cloud cover here and there. And wind's not really going to be much of a problem either, gusting really up to around 20 kilometers an hour tomorrow. Going to be a really picturesque day, I think, tomorrow with all the rime ice still around. And even on Sunday, not too much in the way of wind. Now in Regina, we're going to see temperatures above normal for this time of year, both Saturday and Sunday with some sunshine, and a little bit of a temperature drop off as we head to the beginning of the week with a little bit of snow possible on Tuesday, but overall not too bad. Saskatoon, same thing, hovering around -7 for the weekend, a little bit more cloud cover and lower temperatures heading into Monday and Tuesday. I wish I had maybe like a breezy magnet or something, Sam, for the next few days, but glad I got the advanced technology now.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
You're looking at some pictures of the amazing wildlife shot by one of the cameras set up at the National Park in the Northwest Territories. Caribou, hares, and wolves were just some of the Arctic life caught on camera. But one animal was not happy having his picture taken. This camera was knocked over by a grizzly bear with enough force to bend the iron bar holding it by 90 degrees. We'll be back after the break. A ceasefire ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin to mark Orthodox Christmas is now in effect in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials are accusing Russia of breaking the temporary truce and opening fire in several areas. As Briar Stewart reports, air raid sirens sounded again today in Kiev and other Ukrainian cities.
As Ukrainian soldiers gathered for a special Orthodox Christmas service, some put their faith in the power of prayer, but none in Russia's supposed ceasefire. I think this ceasefire is like always the usual bullshit, said one soldier. What ceasefire? Probably they need to get some respite. Russia said its troops would observe a 36-hour ceasefire to mark the holy holiday. Ukraine rejected that overture and warned its residents to stay away from church services as they could be targeted. Not long after it supposedly came into effect, air raid sirens sounded across the country, sending people into shelters, including those in traditional holiday dress. Closer to the front line, there was little comfort. The eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk was rocked by explosions in the hours before the ceasefire deadline. I personally feel fear, said one woman. The Ukrainian authorities in Kherson released this footage showing the aftermath of an attack on a fire station, which they say happened early Friday. Officials say one rescue worker was killed. Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed the country was honoring its own ceasefire and accused Ukraine of continuing to fight, which the country had vowed to keep doing.
We need 365 days of ceasefire a year. It should be a peace.
Abbas Galyamov used to write speeches for President Putin, and now he's one of his biggest critics. He sees this as a failed attempt to reassert control.
So when you are trying to set the agenda and nobody is following your agenda, you are looking like a loser. Nobody respects what you are telling. Nobody is paying attention to what you're telling.
Russia claims its ceasefire will last until Saturday evening, but along the front lines, the Ukrainian army says nothing has changed. Their positions are under attack, but they still gather together to try and celebrate the holiday and toast what they hope will be victory in the year ahead. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
And Ethan's back with one last look at your weather.
And a possibility of some fog tonight in Regina and Saskatoon, Sam. But overall, I think it'll be a little less dense than we've seen over the past couple of days. By tomorrow morning, mostly clear already at -9 in Regina. And we'll keep warming up to around -5 at the noon hour, looking for some sunny conditions. Be a bit breezy with winds out of the southwest, but not too bad. Saskatoon, similar picture around -11. We're looking for light south winds to start the morning. And then as we head to the afternoon, mostly clear conditions. Temperatures not warming up all that much. And this is, of course, Orthodox Christmas Eve. So if you have any activities planned in Regina and Saskatoon, -15 in Regina, -10 in Saskatoon tonight. A little breezy, but not too bad. And as well, Sam, there will be a full moon, the first full moon of 2023, to mark that season as well.
Oh boy, thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
And something stunning before we leave you this week. Tourists are flocking to Harbin, China for an international ice and snow festival. The event includes ice sculptures and sculpting contests, winter sports parades, and other celebrations. Dozens of teams have created ice sculptures. One of the most popular exhibits, a giant snow sculpture of a rabbit. This event is considered the world's biggest ice and snow carnival. It lasts a couple of months. And that is it for us this week. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Sask or Saskatoon, or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. Glenn Reed and Ethan will be back with more local news and weather tonight at 11. Thank you for watching and have a great weekend.